Hello, everyone. Today, we learn the story of Henry III of France, the King of France. In the echoing halls of the Louvre, a young prince once stood, not yet a king, but already burdened with the weight of a kingdom that had long lost its innocence. His name was Henry, born into the splendor of the French court, a son of the powerful Catherine de' Medici, and King Henry II of France. History would remember him as Henry III, but few would recall the pain, the inner conflict, and the heartache that shaped his path, not just as a monarch, but as a man. Henry's early years were shadowed by the blood-soaked curtain of the French wars of religion. France, once united under the glittering canopy of art, chivalry, and elegance, had splintered into factions. Catholics and Huguenots, royalists and rebels, each believing their vision of France was the true one. Henry, though raised Catholic, grew up seeing the cost of intolerance, witnessing firsthand how hatred disguised as righteousness could rip apart even the strongest empires. But Henry was not just a prince destined for a throne. He was a soul torn between peace and power, duty and desire, war and wisdom. Long before he claimed the crown of France, Henry had known both glory and grief. At the age of 22, he was elected king of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a foreign land, distant and different. It was a triumph, yes, but it came at the cost of being a stranger in a strange land. He didn't speak the language, he didn't understand the customs, and while his crown glittered, his heart grew heavy. He could have remained in Poland, ruling from afar, trying to mold himself into a king in exile. But when his brother Charles IX died in 1574, Henry saw a chance not just to return home, but to return to a destiny he never quite believed was his. He slipped away from Poland in the dead of night, traveling thousands of miles back to France. It was not an escape. It was a pilgrimage, not to power, but to purpose. But kingship did not greet him with open arms. When Henry III ascended the throne of France, he stepped into a kingdom on the edge. Civil war raged, the people were tired, the nobles were restless, and the church, which should have been a pillar of peace, had become another battlefield. Young men today who have faced failures, the sting of rejection, the ache of unrealized dreams, the silence of those who were once supporters, can look at Henry's early reign and understand that even kings are not spared defeat. Every time Henry tried to bring peace, another fire flared up. Every treaty was followed by treachery. Every attempt at unity was mocked by another betrayal. It seemed that failure followed him like a shadow, whispering in courtly corners, "You are not enough." But Henry did not give up. He was not perfect. He made mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. He was criticized for his appearance, his manners, his religious tolerance. In a world that demanded rigid strength, Henry dared to show vulnerability. He mourned openly. He prayed fervently, he loved deeply, and in that he found a strange, quiet kind of strength. He tried to bridge divides between the Catholics and Huguenots, even when it cost him the loyalty of both sides. He believed in a France where coexistence was not just possible, but essential. He passed the Edict of Beaulieu, granting freedoms to Protestants, hoping that compassion would succeed where conquest had failed. Yet the League, a militant Catholic group, rose against him, declaring him unfit to rule a Christian kingdom. Many would have abandoned the cause. Many would have surrendered the crown or become tyrants to protect it. But Henry chose a different path. He looked beyond the crown. He aligned himself with Henry of Navarre, a Protestant, and acknowledged that the future of France was not one man's vision, but the unity of many. This alliance was both bold and dangerous. It was seen as weakness by his enemies, but it was, in truth, the greatest act of courage. Even as he lost battles, even as his own people plotted against him, even as the League called for his death, Henry stood firm. His was not a reign of ease or grandeur, but of quiet resilience. He became a king who ruled not by fear, but by faith, in France, in reconciliation, and in the possibility of a better tomorrow. His story turned tragic on August 1st, 1589. In a modest cloister near Saint-Cloud, a monk named Jacques Clement, twisted by zealotry, stabbed Henry in the heart. The king died the next day. His reign was over, his vision unfinished. But the legacy, that lived on. Henry III's final act was not revenge, but redemption. As he lay dying, he named Henry of Navarre, his Protestant ally, as his rightful successor. It was an unthinkable act in a time when religion defined royalty. But in doing so, he ensured that the wars which had haunted France for decades could finally find a resting place. Henry of Navarre would later convert to Catholicism, take the throne as Henry IV, and usher in an era of peace under the Edict of Nantes. It is easy, especially for young people today, to believe that failure defines them, that a lost opportunity, a mistake, or a broken dream means the end of their story. But Henry III's life says otherwise. Here was a man born into privilege who tasted more bitterness than bliss, a king who wore a crown but bled like any commoner, a ruler who tried to unite when others demanded he divide. And though he died before he saw his dream realized, it was his courage, his empathy, and his refusal to give in to hatred that laid the foundation for France's future. To the young dreamer who feels lost after a rejection, to the student who has failed an exam and feels the world slipping away, to the artist who paints unseen, to the entrepreneur who watches a venture collapse, look to Henry III. Not because he was flawless, but because he was faithful to the fight, to the hope, and to the belief that light will always break through the darkest clouds. History may not always celebrate him as loudly as others, but in the quiet chapters, in the margins of dusty books, Henry III of France remains a symbol, not of power, but of persistence. He reminds us that failure is not the opposite of success. It is its foundation, that sometimes the greatest leaders are not those who conquer, but those who endure, and that a single act of courage, even in the face of death, can change a nation's fate. So when the world whispers that you are not enough, remember, Henry, remember that even a king failed, often, publicly, painfully, but he rose again and again until the day he could rise no more, and in that final rising he passed the torch, not just to a man, but to an idea. That kindness is strength, that unity is victory, and that failure is just the beginning.